Hello, good peoples. Sean Welcome here, and welcome to another episode of Spoken Word Tip Tuesdays. So today I wanted to stress the importance of knowing and wrapping language around why you wrote a particular poem, having intention behind why you wrote a poem, getting clarity on that has just tremendous benefits. And so I'm going to explain why in a little bit, but before I get into that, I just want to say that the human experience is vast and deep and wide and complex. And so the poetic expressions of all of that, is going to be just as varied, right? We come from different social locations, and so that always has an impact on how we communicate, the way we communicate, the way we put our words together. It's kind of all over the place, right? But understanding your why you wrote something, understanding your intention behind why you wrote something, getting clarity in your language around why you wrote something is just, that's my tip, like going in on that if you haven't already. So I'll give a few examples and then kind of get into the benefits. So there's a buddy of mine, C. Hopewell. He has a poem, I think it's called Bird Food. And the first line in the poem goes, "You could feed the swans at Lake Eola Pond, but you can't feed the people." And it goes on, he begins to unpack the absurdity sort of this statement, right? And the intention behind that poem, based on what I know of him and know of his work, was not necessarily to compete in a poetry slam setting, right, where you're being judged, that kind of thing. And I also don't think it was cathartic, where he was just saying something just to kind of get it out there. I would categorize the intention of that poem as more of a conversation piece, because effectively what he's presenting to those in earshot of that poem is this question. It's like, are swans more valuable than human beings if those human beings are experiencing homelessness, right? Because there's a law that suggests that that's true, right? And so it's kind of like something to chew on, or to, reflect on, and to, that kind of social consciousness awareness type poem, which I would categorize as a conversation piece. I've had a poem that I wrote years ago called Martyrs, and the intention behind that poem, I mean, at the time I was in pursuit of being abstinent or not having sex before I was in a committed relationship with somebody I loved and loved me, and we were married, and there was this, we were locked in, right? And it was challenging to write because really it was an ideal, right? It was something I was striving towards, and I thought by writing this poem it would affirm that ideal in me as I kind of moved towards that, right? So didn't necessarily happen that way 100%, but that piece would be, I would consider more cathartic, right? I just want to get this out and say it in public and hold myself accountable to my own words, right? Which would kind of strengthen that aspiration, right? Other people have poems about breakups and 12-step programs about trying to get off drugs or alcohol, and it was an assignment from the person facilitating, right? We have all types of reasons why we write poems, and we just, I think, kind of just write them, but we don't necessarily take the time to reflect on why we wrote those pieces, or go in on getting language around that. And there's a huge benefit to wrapping your mind and your language around your intention. And so the first benefit I would say is that you'll always have a compass pointing you north towards your intention. If you're thinking about your why before you write the poem, obviously, right? Like, you have the why you're trying to write this on the forefront of your mind, and the words will just sort of they'll look different based on like your depth of vocabulary and, you know, how you color words and stuff like that, but you'll always be have language pointing you towards that intention. That's the first benefit of like having it in your mind, right? The second benefit of knowing your why and knowing your intention is that when you go to perform that poem, it puts you like in an advantage from a performance standpoint when you can contextualize the poem before you perform it, right? General audiences love that kind of stuff where you have sort of the root cause of like, what was the inspiration behind this piece? And then you kind of go into it, so people kind of know where you were trying to go, and then they can experience how you unpacked it, right? So just from a general presentation standpoint, it's helpful to know your why so that you can articulate that going into your performance. And then the third benefit of knowing your intention and knowing your why, having language around that, is if you ever go to ask for feedback on your poem, the person that's giving you feedback needs to understand your intention and your why, right? So that they can have something to measure it up against. I know sometimes people ask me like, oh, you know, they would read a poem like, what'd you think of it? And my first question is always, what was your intention? Like, why'd you write it? So that I have a framework that I can either say, okay, this works for that. Some people might, you know, write something for a poetry slam, and I would judge the writing based on whether or not it would work in a poetry slam, or if it would do well in a poetry slam or not, based on my experiences over the years. And so, one, it helps you in the writing process if you know your why and when you know your intention. Two, it will help you in your performance if you're able to articulate your why prior to performing the poem. And three, it'll help people who are giving you feedback so they can know your intention and have something to measure it up against. All right, I hope that was helpful, beneficial, whatever it is. Till next Tuesday, peace, love, and poetry.